For nearly 1,000 years, and in some cases even longer, Christianity has been, it's been fractured. But what if that division isn't the final word? Today, we're going to dive into the modern Catholic Church's official quest to reunite all Christians, a mission really spelled out in a key document called Unum Sint.
And you really can't overstate how important this is. Pope John Paul II made it absolutely crystal clear. This work for Christian unity, what we call ecumenism, it's not some kind of optional side project. He says it belongs organically to the Church's life and action. It's basically part of its DNA.
So why is it so central? Well, from the Catholic perspective, the way things are now, it's seen as a wound. It goes directly against what Christ prayed for, that his followers would be one. And let's be practical, it's a massive roadblock. I mean, how can the Church effectively share its message with the world when it looks so divided from the inside?
To get a handle on the Catholic Church's approach here, we're going to use this really simple but powerful framework. We'll look at the heart, the hands, and the head of the ecumenical movement. So, we'll start with the official commitment to unity, then we'll explore the spiritual foundation, that's the heart. After that, we'll see how that plays out in real-world collaboration, the hands. And finally, we'll get into the really tough theological talks, the head, before we take a look at the future. Okay, first up, making unity a priority. And this isn't just some vague hope. No, it has been a formal, top-level commitment for decades now.
Just look at the timeline here. The modern movement really gets its formal start in 1964 with the Second Vatican Council. Then, fast forward to 1995, and you have Pope John Paul II doubling down, dedicating an entire encyclical, that's a major papal document, just to this topic. And his successor, Pope Benedict XVI, right out of the gate, confirmed it as a priority for his own time as Pope. That shows a really remarkable, consistent focus at the very highest levels.
All right, so now we're going to move from the official declarations to the very soul of the movement, the heart. You can think of this as the spiritual engine that makes the whole thing run.
And that brings us to this idea of spiritual ecumenism. It's often called the soul of the ecumenical movement. And the most crucial point here is that unity doesn't start in some committee meeting. It starts inside the heart of every single Christian. It's all about changing from the inside first.
And this slide just lays out so perfectly what that inner change actually looks like. You've got these pillars, right? There's personal conversion, just turning more deeply towards the gospel. Then there's common prayer, which is described as the deepest current that gives the whole process life. You also have an honest look at our own faults, and this huge step of recognizing that, hey, Christians born today aren't to blame for splits that happened centuries ago. And finally, and this one is so powerful, you have the ecumenism of martyrs, that shared witness of Christians from different traditions who died for the very same faith.
Okay, so from that foundation of the heart, we move right into the hands. We're talking tangible, real-world action and working together.
The idea here is really simple. You don't wait until you have perfect unity to start working together. In fact, it's the working together that actually builds the unity. When different Christians collaborate on things like social justice, charity, or defending human dignity, well, that becomes a true school of ecumenism. It's a hands-on way to grow closer. And this slide shows the flow perfectly. Action isn't the starting point. It's what naturally comes from a changed heart. First, you have the spiritual renewal, the prayer, the conversion. And out of that inner reality flows this outer, collaborative action. The hands follow the heart. Makes sense, right?
All right, now for what is, let's be honest, the most intellectually challenging part of this journey, the head. This is where different Christian communities sit down at the table to talk through centuries of doctrinal differences.
But this dialogue has a critical ground rule. This quote from Pope John Paul II makes it totally clear. You can't achieve unity by compromising on what you believe is essential truth. The goal isn't to create some watered-down, lowest common denominator Christianity. It's about finding unity in the fullness of faith.
And it's really important to get the goal straight here. The main goal of ecumenism is to bring entire churches and communities into full, visible union. Now, that's different from the personal journey of an individual who decides to become Catholic. The two things are seen as totally compatible, but they're distinct paths.
So what are the big topics on the table? Well, these are some of the major hurdles that need some really deep dialogue. Different ways of understanding the Eucharist, the whole nature of ordained ministry and its connection back to the apostles, that's called apostolic succession, the authority of the church, and of course the big one, the role of the Pope.
And that brings us to the central paradox of this whole dialogue. From the Catholic point of view,
The Pope, the Bishop of Rome, is meant to be the ultimate sign and servant of unity for the whole Church. But for many other Christians, that exact same office is seen as the single biggest obstacle to unity. Figuring out that paradox is pretty much the key to the whole thing.
So, after decades and decades of work, where does this whole movement stand today? That brings us to our final section, the future of ecumenism.
You know, there's a real concern you hear from some people that the movement is stuck in an ecumenical winter. It's this idea that after all the excitement that followed the Second Vatican Council, progress has kind of slowed down, and maybe a bit of apathy or fatigue is set in.
And these modern challenges are pulling the movement in some really unhelpful directions. On one hand, you've got relativism, this feeling that, doctrine doesn't really matter anymore, which just kills any motivation. Then there's what Cardinal Cosper famously called savage ecumenism, where you just pretend unity is already here and gloss over real important differences. And then, of course, you have the total opposite reaction, a new kind of confessionalism that just retreats into its own camp and rejects any dialogue at all.
So what's the antidote? What's the fix for this winter? Well, according to the sources we're looking at, it's not some brand new strategy. It's actually a return to the original one. It's about going back to what's called the sane ecumenism of the Second Vatican Council, an approach that is super passionate about unity, but also dead serious about truth, trying to avoid all those pitfalls of apathy and extremism.
Ultimately, this entire effort brings up a really profound question, and not just for Christians, but for everybody. In a world that seems to get more and more fractured every single day, what does it actually mean to commit yourself to a long, hard, and honest search for unity? At its heart, it's a quest about healing old wounds and, hopefully, rebuilding some bridges.